used to do, what other cultures do, and it really is fascinating. So I have a whole bunch of questions for you. And I can't thank James enough. What is it, 4 o'clock in the morning there?
Yeah, it's about 5:30 in the morning.
Good.
No, it's fine. This is early for me. I'm about to walk my dog, so it's perfect timing for me.
What is everybody going to do when everybody goes back to work? The dogs are going to be like, hey, we walk 4 times a day.
Yeah, exactly. My dog's even getting sick of it. She's like, seriously, at noon? We got to walk now? That's how it is.
So everybody, James Nestor is here. My husband David is going to ask questions at the end. And I'm Suzanne Lucy, and we own Page 158 Books. And whose anxiety is high? Whose depression is high? Who's not sleeping? I think all of us. I'm even getting complaints at the bookstore. People can't, and they're so mad at themselves because they can't concentrate on reading. So poetry helps. But what's really going to help you is breathing. And James, like I said before, the science behind all this, and the fact that we don't breathe as much or as well as we did in even the 1940s, and our weight has gone up. I mean, there's so much science behind what this says about, you can eat eat the right things and exercise, but breathing can help you live longer than any of those combined. So James, why don't you give us a little talk about yourself, or tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So you summed it up just very well right there. So I had started with this. I had no intention of ever writing this book. The way I'm a journalist, I was writing for magazines for a long time, and but had about 11 years ago a very weird experience that my doctor couldn't explain. I was in a breathing class, a lot of these things here in San Francisco. That's what we specialize in, and I just started sweating profusely from breathing at just this very calm rate, and no one could really explain what had happened. As a science journalist, I didn't want to write a memoir about it. I wanted to understand the science behind it. But it wasn't until several years after that I met free divers. These are these people, these athletes that are just incredible. They can hold their breath for 7, 8, 9 minutes at a time, dive to depths to 300, 400 feet on a single breath, not even fins, nothing else. This sounds impossible until you see it. And we considered it scientifically impossible that the body could go that deep for that long, but that just shows you what we know about science. It's always changing, and whenever someone busts the limits, then things have to be redefined. So these people told me that only by breathing in proper ways can you hold your breath for that long. And not only will it help you dive very deep, but it will also can help cure a list of chronic diseases. That sounds crazy. They told me about a guy who used it to lose weight, and someone else who used it to battle E. coli that was injected into his veins. That sounds insane. They told me how breathing affects your posture. They showed me how it affects your skeleton in your face and your paws. And I said, this stuff sounds crazy. But I spent several years in the field at Stanford, Harvard, all over the place, and found that what they were saying was absolutely true. This is a really underutilized and underrecognized pillar of health. Breathing is, just as you had beautifully said at the beginning here. You can eat the right foods, you can exercise all you want, you can have the right genes, but if you're not breathing well, you will never ever be healthy. And this is a message that I found didn't seem to be broadly available to the general public.
I love when you got into what different tribes do, different cultures do, and most of them, when they're babies or infants, they will close the mouth so that babies will breathe only through their nose. I found that fascinating. That's not what we're thinking. We just want them to sleep, but
Yeah, and it's infant sleep apnea and infant snoring is an epidemic right now, and their findings. Stanford is really specializing in studying this, and they've been studying it for. Christian Guillemot has been down there studying this for 50 years, and he's finding it's directly correlated to metabolic diseases. It's directly correlated to ADHD. It's directly correlated to neurological problems, growth problems. And it's so undiagnosed. People think of babies snoring is cute, but it's someone who is struggling to breathe. And if you're taking 25,000 breaths a day and you're struggling to do that, it is bad news. You're going to wear your body down, not only when you're an infant, but when you're an adult as well.
And I bet that has to do, I was thinking, like, just the common cold, you can't breathe through your nose. So people are like, why does this make me feel so bad? I'm so tired. And probably a lot to do with breath.
Yeah, I mean, your nostrils get inflamed because you have a sickness. You're forced to breathe through your mouth, and
Mhm.
and you're also when you're doing that, you're offloading a lot of carbon dioxide. And we understand carbon dioxide as being this evil thing, and it is in the atmosphere. We know it's directly correlated to climate change, acidity of the oceans, crazy weather patterns. All of that is proven. Whether or not you believe that's one thing, but that's the science of it. But we need a balance of carbon dioxide in our bodies. It's not about getting as much of that stuff out. And this was something that we've known this is documented at Yale 100 years ago. We've known about this for so long, but still people think the more they breathe, the better that is, the more oxygen they're getting in. And the opposite is happening. You're getting less oxygen to your tissues and muscles and where you need it.
And
If
the
you,
blood cells you're saying too, right? Like
pardon?
they need to get into actually the blood cells, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So we can inhale and exhale. A lot of people breathe about 20 times a minute. That is not uncommon. When you're breathing that much, you're just breathing into your chest, right? So you're filling up air in your nose, if you're lucky enough to breathe through your nose. Most people that breathe that much are breathing through their mouth. Then you have this huge airway and the bronchus right here. And none of that can soak up oxygen and deliver it to your bloodstream. So you're just bringing in air to push it back out. So they've found that people who breathe at a rate of 20 times a minute, only half of that air is making it through the lungs into the bloodstream. So they're constantly out of air. They're
Mhm.
constantly stressing out. So the first thing they need to do is slow down your breathing. And you can, if you slow it down to 6 breaths a minute, that's a challenge for a lot of people, but you get increase of efficiency of 35% with
Mhm.
your breathing, which just imagine adding 35% efficiency to anything. Then imagine adding that to your body and letting your body work that much more efficiently for a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a couple of months.
Mhm.
Guess what's going to happen? Well, I found what happens. These people are able to overcome severe problems time and time again. It's all measured. It's all documented.
It's fascinating. You talk about this woman from Germany, Dresden, Germany, and she had scoliosis. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that? I found that, I mean, people go in for surgeries, they have back braces, and
Yeah.
I knew somebody with a back brace, and it's not comfortable. So
Yeah.
specific.
I don't. Back braces are necessary for some people.
Mhm.
This woman, Katerina Schroth, grew up in the 1900s in Dresden, Germany, and I was just scrolling to a little video here. I'll show you in a second. But she was given a brace, given a wheelchair, said, "Live the rest of your life this way." That's it. But she had other thoughts about the human body's potential, and she trained herself. She called it orthopedic breathing over a couple of years and breathed her spine straight again. So I'll show you a little. This sounds outrageous, but all
I
of
was
it's
picturing
documented.
it, so I'm glad you have slides because,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll show it to you guys here. Hopefully, try to do this smoothly. Give me 1 second, and you should be seeing that now. So here we go. So this is how people with scoliosis, I mean, pretty common problem, especially at the turn of the century. So Schroth was inspired by balloons. She found that when a balloon inflates, it affects whatever's around it. And we've got 2 huge balloons right here in our chest. So she learned how to really take in deep breaths. And after she fixed herself, she started a school where she would take over 100 women at the same time. These people had been left. They were considered hopeless. And she would teach them how to stretch in ways and breathe in ways to straighten their spines. And she was derided. You can see this, the effects after a few weeks of this. Here's a kid who used her methods.
Wow.
She was derided. They tried to shut her down for years. She said no. She continued doing what she was doing. She died 3 days short of her 91st birthday. And before she died, she was awarded a medal by the German government for her contributions to medicine. So sometimes it takes, a few decades
Yeah.
for the medical institutions and for people to come around. But the reason I called the book the New Science of a Lost Art, and I was not looking for these stories. This same story played out over and over and over again, where these people discovered something It drastically changed other people's lives. There were no side effects to it. It was scientifically proven. Then when these people died, all of that science went away. And sometimes it was rediscovered with a different name a few decades later. It was just maddening finding this pattern over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about the Olympics too, and how, they won all the medals just by doing the breathing technique that the coach had liked. And then they shut that down, but then, 10, 20 years later, it started up again.
Sure.
Yeah.
If I could impose another video here, I'll show you if that's okay. I'll show one. So this, another story, the exact same story arc here. This is a man with emphysema. They were rolled in, put on gurneys, put an oxygen tube in their faces, fed antibiotics, and left there to die for years and years. That's his neck. That's how he's breathing, because he's lost all diaphragmatic movement. So he has to strain his neck and lift his shoulders just to get a breath in. That's his chest. That's his stomach right there. So a choral teacher came in. This is him after a few weeks of treatment, of just breathing, just learning how to engage his diaphragm. And this was done by a choral teacher. Same story. They tried to shut him down. They said he wasn't a doctor. He kept doing it. This is how he was before, and this is how he was a few months after he walked out of the hospital and lived a happy life.
His face looks completely different. It doesn't look like he gained much weight, but he's happy.
So it's miraculous to me. Maybe not miraculous, but this is where you get a little frustrated, because they showed the improvements in the diaphragm and the lungs from these patients, x-rays of all of this. It was confirmed by doctors, and yet nothing changed when this guy left after 10 years in the hospital. They just went back to doing the same thing, and they're doing the same thing now. So I'm hoping we're at a moment now that we can look back and figure out some of these methods and start introducing them to people who really need it.
And it's hard, because I was doing it in bed while I was reading your book last night, and I've done it a few other times too. And you almost get that panicky feeling to come, and then it goes away when you're like, okay, I can take a breath. But you were talking about doing running in the middle of the woods, and tell us about that, because I was scared for you.
Oh no, I was with a breathing therapist. So, and it was fun. I mean, it wasn't the most pleasant thing I've ever done, but
it
the
was
concept
fun.
of that is most of us overbreathe. And I know that sounds weird. It's like, what do you mean I overbreathe? Whatever air I take in, I exhale. But you can think about breathing like rowing a boat. So you can take, if you're trying to get across a lake, you can take a zillion short little strokes with your oars, and you're going to get to where you're going. Or you can take a few very fluid, long strokes with it and get to where you're going so much more efficiently with so much less effort. And so breathing should be considered the same thing. Sorry.
And it helps you lose weight. So everybody.
It can help you lose weight by allowing you to, we can only burn fat with oxygen. So if you're running anaerobically, which is what happens if you work out too hard, you start burning lactic acid. That is, you're burning glucose, but you're not burning fat. And so this is something when you see, especially after New Year's, people are like, I'm going to the gym. I'm going to work out as hard as I possibly can. I'm going to breathe as hard. It's the worst thing you can do. You need to slowly acclimate your body to this and never work out harder than you can breathe correctly. And this is so important. And there's so many studies finding this. So elite athletes can push this a bit more. So there's this thing called hypoventilation training, where you breathe under your metabolic needs. So you breathe at this extremely slow rate that builds CO2, allows more circulation, which is why you feel this incredible heat at the back of your neck, your fingers get all warm. That's your body responding to CO2. And so many athletes have used this and gone on to win more gold medals than anyone else. And it's been this like real hush-hush secret, I think on purpose, because they don't want everyone to know about it. But I dug it up, and now I guess
who's going to believe them too, because I used to teach aerobics, and I constantly have to tell people to breathe, and I would watch people. I'm like, you're holding your breath. And it was the people that methodically breathed that did much better. They
Yeah,
could go because they weren't as tired.
you have to. You don't want to be holding your breath, especially when you're stretching around. In any yoga class worth its salt, they're going to say constantly breathe in a circle. You want to constantly be moving breath around. You don't want to hold your breath, and you don't want to. You just long, deep breaths, because yoga is a science of breathing. It was never a science of aerobic exercise until the last 100 years.
The other thing I found fascinating was when you were talking about Hawaiian culture and Chinese and Native American and Catholics, and we all have the same chant that's about 5.5 seconds long, with prayer, breathing, and everything we do. And it was passed on for generations and generations. We just do it, but it's all the same breathing,
Yeah.
which I find, fascinating. So
the Italian researchers who were doing this study about 20 years ago, they found the paper is fantastic. It's widely available for anyone, but they found that the Catholic Rosary, actually its origin was from India. So the Catholics took it in this chanting pattern. And they compared the Rosary, the Ave Maria, to Om Mani Padme Hum, if there's any Buddhists out there, one of the most famous Buddhist chants, to the Sata Nama, which is a Kundalini chant, to Om. And all of them, when you're vocalizing, you're exhaling. So if you say Om, it's going to last about 5 to 6 seconds, and then you have 5 to 6 seconds to inhale. And they found that the prayer was great, but unnecessary if you just breathed in this pattern, your whole body entered the state of, they called it coherence, where everything worked at peak efficiency. And if anyone has a heart rate variability monitor, even if you have a blood pressure cuff, you can take your blood pressure before, heart rate variability before, breathe in this way, about 5 to 6 seconds in, 5 to 6 seconds out, then check your blood pressure and your heart rate variability afterwards. And I think you'll be stunned. And what you're experiencing is not psychosomatic. It's not a placebo. This is your body working at the perfect state where it wants to work, so it can heal itself and go further and deeper. And since that study came out, there's been so many different studies by psychiatrists, by other researchers in the field, finding that when people breathe in this pattern, whether you have anxiety, depression, even anorexia, 9/11 survivor, I could go on and on. Everyone can benefit from this. You don't need to be sick to be benefiting from working at peak efficiency. Everyone can do that.
So one of my other careers was working in an oncology center, and I used to take everybody's blood pressure, and it would be so high, and they were huffing and puffing, and they're walking down the hall, and they were sick, but their blood pressure and their breathing was so off. I would take their blood pressure at the end of the doctor's appointment, and it would be normal, but they were so freaked out about that too. Oh my God, my blood pressure is so high.
Yeah, and on the opposite end, if people are still like, oh, breathing can't do all this, you can breathe over breathe for 2 minutes, check your blood pressure after that, and check your heart rate variability after that. That to me is what I think is so neat about this stuff. You don't, like with some diets, you're going to have to wait weeks and weeks to see real results. With exercise, sometimes it's weeks. With breathing, sometimes it's seconds, or minutes before you can measure your results with simple machines that are available to a lot of people. A lot of people have pulse oximeters now. So put that on, breathe in different ways, and watch what happens. And it's magic.
Yeah. There's another story in here about a man that was in the hospital. He was having an asthma attack, and he breathed his way out of it. And then he helped another patient, and then he got a whole movement going too. Yeah.
So that, and what's interesting about that story, that was from the 50s. And this guy, Konstantin Buteyko, Ukrainian cardiologist, studied this for years and years and years. And just about 10 years ago, Dr. Alicia Muret at Southern Methodist University found that 120 asthmatics, she had them carry around this capnometer, which just gauged their carbon dioxide. And she was able to see both in populations of asthmatics and people who suffered from panic. She was able to see the panic attack, the asthma attack, before it came on, because their breathing got disjointed and they started breathing too much. So her only intervention was to teach them when they felt that, to start to breathe slower and start to breathe in a healthy way. And that alone had such a tremendous effect on the incidences of asthma and panic attacks and respiratory health and so many other markers.
There's another story too about Satori. I've been letting you do all the hard names because I couldn't pronounce them. But she called into a place in Colorado that was teaching her how to breathe. And she was on a flight and had a terrible asthma attack and ended up in the hospital. But this breathing worked for her.
Yeah,
there's so many things that it helps, you know?
There's thousands of these stories. I mean, and people seek the treatment once they've given up, once they've struggled for 10 years, they've tried every medication. A lot of asthma medications are wonder drugs. Bronchodilators, steroids are so important, and they've helped people live. They've helped people survive. But if you take these drugs for decades, as every asthmatic knows, your asthma is likely going to get worse. You're going to start suffering from autoimmune problems, and you could very well start suffering from macular degeneration. You will go blind. So it's these people who had been on these drugs for decades where it was either stop taking the bronchodilators and suffer an asthma attack and maybe die, or keep taking this stuff and get sicker and sicker. So as Westerners are, we wait till we get so bad before we seek a lot of interventions. So they've found breathing, and this has been documented in dozens of studies. You change your breathing, you can have a vast and pronounced and lasting impact on asthma, anxiety, and so many other issues.
Mm-hmm. And you also, the history and the science of it all behind it, like in 1940, we were breathing average of 10 breaths a minute. Now we're up to about 20. Our weight is significantly higher. Like for a 6-foot tall man, the average weight was 160, and now it's 210.
Yeah.
That's breathing. It's not all of it, but it's fast food. But
it's so much to do. Has so much to do with fast food and processed foods. I was making an analogy in that just as we've become a culture of overeaters, there's some science suggesting we're also breathing too much. It's impossible to go back in time and gauge people's breathing, but some studies do show that people were breathing a lot less per minute, a lot less air, and a lot less respiratory rate than we are now. We know this because my father-in-law is a pulmonologist. When he was in school like 40 years ago, he said that what was considered normal respiratory rate was 8 to 12 breaths a minute. Now, if you look anywhere, it's 12 to 20. And that's what's considered normal, and if you tell someone that you're breathing 6 breaths a minute, that is half of what's considered normal. So that is highly abnormal and wrong. But then you hook yourself up to sensors and measurements and you say, wow, my body loves this. So there's a real gap in what has been traditionally taught and explained in medicine to what the science is really saying. And it's, there's no pointing fingers here, but science isn't a static thing. It's constantly changing. So we have to continually update what we know and update how we're treating people if we're going to treat them in the best way.
Are you all watching and monitoring your breathing right now with your mouths closed?
Try to write a book on this stuff. I'm a complete neurotic. It's awful. Don't do it.
Well, I was wondering, there's an appendage here of breathing methods. There's not one size fits all for any of this. Is there one that you enjoy more, or?
Well, it depends what you're going for. If you have a stuffy nose,
healthy, no.
Okay.
Happy.
Well, yeah. Here's one breathing method. It can do all those things. Takes 2 minutes, but it costs $100. You have to PayPal me that. It depends on what you want to do. If you're going to exercise, you can breathe one way. If you're sick, you can breathe another way. If preventative maintenance, you can breathe another way. But the way I try to set up the book is first identify this problem is like, we're totally messed up, like from evolution, from our environment. There's no doubt about this. And then spend most of the time in the book looking at the foundation. These are things that everybody can benefit from. You can call them various different names because all these cultures came from different ways, but they all found the same thing by breathing slowly, by exhaling, a deep exhale and deep inhale, by breathing less most of the time. These are all things that can benefit all of us. And then once you have that down, you can go, I call this breathing plus. You can really see the potential of breathing and see where it can bring you. And the science of that is just really, really nuts. So to answer your question, I try to focus on that 5.5, and don't freak out if you're half a second off. 5 to 6 breaths a minute is a good thing to start with. I take my phone. I notice when I sit down at my computer and there's like 60 emails, and I'm just like, oh God.
Only 60?
My breathing goes out the window. I take my phone. I use this really simple app that just creates a tone, and I put it there. So when I'm answering these emails, I can be a little calmer. And they found that 80% of office workers, that's one estimate, suffers from something called email apnea, where there's too much stuff going on. You forget to breathe, you hold your breath, and then you go, and you hold it again. And that creates total stress in your body. It creates inflammation. So that, especially now, is the last thing you want to do. But before I go to sleep, if I'm having trouble going to sleep, you can breathe into a count of 4. We can all try this. I'll put you all to sleep, everybody. You can breathe into
Can you?
4. No, I'm not a hypnotist. Stay awake. There's more good stuff coming. So breathe into a count of 4. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale to 8. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale, 8. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So what you're doing there, and there's various ways to do this, is you are exhaling a lot more than you're inhaling. The longer you exhale, the more relaxed you're going to get. And you can see this by placing your hand over your heart, or if you want to take your pulse somewhere else, that's fine. You can inhale to a count of about 4, and then exhale to a count of about 12. And you're going to feel your heart rate slowing down. So that is because we're stimulating this parasympathetic, this rest and relax response when we exhale. So these are little levers you can use. If you want more energy, inhale more than you're exhaling. If you want to be relaxed, exhale more than you're inhaling. And you can kind of hack into your nervous system this way. And that's a trick. Andrew Weil made that famous, that one. But there's so many others. In Pranayama, there's hundreds of these things, but they're all essentially doing the same thing.
Everybody feel good? Does anybody have any questions? And one more thing, I want to thank Robert Campbell, because we had your book in the store and we sold them, and I had glanced at it, and he was the one who said, it's a really good book. Let's see if you can get him here. And thank you, Robert. Cheers with water.
Robert was the reason.
Yes. And thank you, James, for coming on. Does anybody have any questions?
I got a few here. So Lindsay wants to know if there are any teaching hospitals or med schools in the U.S. that do work in this field.
The simple answer is breathing is not part of the curriculum of even pulmonology, which you would think.
Interesting.
This is the branch that studies the lungs. And I know this because, as I mentioned, my father-in-law is a pulmonologist. He read every word of this book, fact-checked the whole thing. At the end of it, he said, you know what? I've never heard of 80% of this stuff, and it's 100% correct. And he is now very pissed off about this. Wow. So he's on this campaign because, I mean, and it's not, no one's to blame here. He's so good at what he does, right? If someone has lung cancer, if someone needs a lung removed, if someone has a lung infection, that's where you go. And the science of that, the modern science of that, is amazing what we can live through now. But they don't deal with preventative maintenance. I will say, since the book's come out, it's been out for about 7 weeks or so, I've gotten so many emails from doctors, different hospitals. Stanford has a huge breathing initiative coming out. Harvard just released a study about breathing. Yale just released a study about breathing. So it really feels like this stuff is going to move into the medical sphere soon, and I hope it does.
Yeah, it seems like it's a natural I mean, you don't need any tools to do it. You just do it.
Well, which a cynic might say, and I heard this from a couple doctors, they're like, well, there's a reason you haven't heard about it. It's free.
Right.
And it's available to everybody. I don't know if I agree with that, to be clear, but that is coming from them, and they work in this field. The problem is, though, is it can take a long time, and a lot of us are impatient, especially people with chronic problems. You're going to have to work a little bit. You're going to have to stay on it. It's harder than popping a pill. It's harder than using a bronchodilator, you know, but at minimum, I think that these people who have these issues should at least be given this information so that they can choose. They can say, I'm too lazy. I'm never going to do that. I want the pill. That's cool.
Right.
Awesome. But for the people who have never heard of this stuff, I think that at minimum, they should have a choice to take control of their breathing. And I really think that this stuff's coming up. I mean, from what I've heard of, there's a neuroscientist down at Stanford that breathing is his thing, and he's gotten a big grant to do some wonderful studies that he's in the middle of right now.
That's excellent.
They do talk a lot about meditation, and that has to do with breathing. And like you said in the book too, prayer is meditation. And I think we are coming around where Western and Eastern medicine can work together.
It's like people are doing it, but they don't realize they're doing it.
Yeah.
It's my opinion that the vast benefits of meditation, especially at the beginning, are not correlated to the mantra, even though that's fine. They have you sit. What's the first thing any meditation has you do? You sit down, focus on your breath.
Yep.
That's it. So by simply breathing this way, that's why you can focus on your breathing while you're driving, while you're watching Tiger King, while you're reading a book. I mean, whatever you want to do, you can breathe while you're doing this. So it's less to ask someone to go in a dark room for 40 minutes a day and focus on one little dot of light. Right. The benefits of meditation are innumerable. No one's going to argue that. You can grow new brain, new connections, all of that. But it takes a long time to get to that level. The first level of meditation, those benefits, I am convinced are all tied to breathing.
That's really cool. So another question from Lindsay is, do we know why we breathe incorrectly these days?
We do. And I am going to take this opportunity to annoy you guys with another little clip here.
Like that question.
This is what has happened to the human head. So you don't have to blame yourself for why you were breathing incorrectly. You can blame evolution. This is what a human skull looked like about 8,000 years ago. So we're moving in time. This is about 2,000 years ago. Watch its mouth, okay? And as we move forward to the modern skull, watch its mouth. Whoa, our mouths get so thin. So why is that a problem to have a mouth that's that thin? Because a mouth that is that small doesn't have enough room for your teeth. So guess what? Teeth growing crooked. And this is a new thing for humans. Only in the past about 400 years have crooked teeth been a thing. All of our ancestors, almost all of our ancestors, had perfectly straight teeth. The other problem with that is if you have a mouth too small for your teeth, it means you have a smaller airway, which is one of the main reasons we have so much snoring. A quarter of us have sleep apnea. We have allergies and asthma as well. So our faces are all messed up from the get-go. This is the sad truth of it. But once you acknowledge this truth, you can then fix it. And that was the whole point of the book, not to dwell on this bummer stuff, but to say, hey, we are anatomically not evolving in a way that is beneficial to our health. No matter what anyone tells you about evolution, that's not how it works. It means change. And we're changing for the worse, especially, and I'm a great example of this, extractions, braces, headgear, all that crap. And they've found that those devices that are used to crane teeth into a mouth that's too small can actually make breathing worse. This is what several researchers at the top of the field have said. There was a book released by Stanford University Press that said exactly this. How frightening is that? So to correlate sleep apnea, and we were trying to fix our mouths being too small. We ended up making them even smaller. And now all of us have our heads out like this just so we can open our airway. But again, the reason I bring this up is so we can recognize it and we can fix it.
Right. That's great. Catherine wanted to know what the name of that app was that does the measured tone.
I will show you. It is, if anyone is a designer, if you're into the latest, greatest UX, you're going to hate this app because it looks like an Atari 2600 game from the 1980s, who I doubt anyone out there is old enough to remember those. But this is it. Don't know if you can see that. It's called Paced Breathing. I am on Android. I'm sure this is on iPhone, and it allows you to put in any breathing pattern you want. So I have 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, and that is the sound it makes. This is totally free. There's no ads on it. There's no anything, just some do-gooder put this up. And I love it for that reason. I love that the design sucks, but it works perfectly, and I don't need something super fancy.
I like that.
But there's dozens of these out there. This is just the one I use because it's very simple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we're all connected. I even see kids with the Garmin watch or the Fitbit. So that's on there too. And there's apps you can do, like take a breath. So
Yep.
When I remember to do that.
Yeah, it looks like that particular one is not available on the iPhone, but there are a number of other ones, including one called the Breathing app, which appears to be free and does not have any additional purchases. So I'm going to get that one and try that one. It sounds good.
Careful of some of those. You know, I can't vouch for those other ones. I know they do the same thing, but maybe they're making money somehow.
Yeah, there's a lot of them that say that there are purchases of it. You know, in-app purchases are available. What are you buying? Patterns? I mean,
bronchodilators and steroids. I don't know.
So Robert wanted to let you know that the hypoventilation breathing really works to bring down the anxiety. The techniques that Anders advocates particularly. And he said whenever he's anxious, he uses those techniques and the anxiety dissipates. So that's great to know, Robert. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm.
They found that so much of anxiety, there's a reason why asthmatics and people with chronic fear-based disorders, whether it's anxiety or anorexia or other issues, they breathe a lot, often way more than other people don't have these conditions because they're hypersensitized to CO2. So the need to breathe is dictated not by oxygen, it's dictated by carbon dioxide. So some of these populations that if their CO2 grows a little too much, it reminds them of having an asthma attack or panic attack. So they panic, they say, I need to breathe more. Guess what happens when you start breathing more? Start more constriction and you have that attack. So this advice of like, hey, sit back and take a deep breath. No, you should be breathing slowly and you should be sometimes holding your breath to bring up that CO2. So this is basic physiology that so many people in medicine know, but it hasn't quite made it out of these academic circles. And that's what I was trying to do with the book.
Well, you're getting there with help. You know, you're going to do this. Do you have an audiobook from Libo FM that, do you do the voice for your book?
Yes, a little story about that. I was all slated to go to this really slick studio in San Francisco. I was excited, you know, professional engineer. COVID hit. I had to do it in the shed in my back room. It was about 110 degrees, no air in there, moving blankets up. So, you know, doing an audiobook for a book about the benefits of breathing in a place where you can breathe. So that's a long way of saying it is available. And Anders Olsen I convinced him to do the breathing methods at the end. So at the end of that book, he does all of the breathing methods in the back of this book. He leads people through that. And that's just a little add-on that you get.
I like your voice. So I'm like, because sometimes an audiobook can just make it or break it for you. We do have an app. Well, not an app, but if you go to our website and go to Libro FM, the first month is free. It never goes away. So
Yep, I
That's
just put
something
a link to that in the chat for everybody, particularly
And
to
we also have the book in stock, and it's something I will go back to and read it and read again, just because you forget. You know, you just go about your life, and you need to step back and say, okay, I'm going to do these techniques. So thank you.
Of course. Thank
And
you.
we're all going to be millionaires and skinny and healthy.
just because we're breathing.
Yeah, just that easy, you know.
Hmm.
Glad you're saying that I'm not, because someone's going to cut out that little clip and then I'm ruined forever. So,
Well, a friend of mine has sleep apnea, and she wasn't using it because she was traveling a lot and doing things, and her blood pressure skyrocketed, her blood sugar skyrocketed, was having a lot of problems, not being able to find her words. There was some stuff going on with her heart. Well, they told her, you need to get back, because her eyes were dry. Everything was because of the sleep apnea. And she's like, they never told me. So we're telling you, if you have sleep apnea, get it checked out, and because it can really cause a lot of health problems. But breathe during the day. Train your brain to want to be able to do this too, because we can fix it on your own, cheap, free. So does anybody else have any more questions?
So let's see, I got actually two more quick ones. So Catherine asks about, she's aware of hypotheses on different species having an average number of heartbeats per lifetime. Do you think that's true for breaths, and is breathing controls heart rate?
That's a good question.
absolutely, it does. If you were to draw a chart, most animals have about 1 billion heartbeats per lifetime. And it's frightening how many animals fit into that. There are exceptions, humans one of them. We get about twice as many. Sadly, dogs get half as many as they should have. Of all the animals,
I know,
why
right?
can't dogs have at least
We
the
love
same?
dog people, yeah, and
So,
cat people.
so a yogi, BKS Iyengar, sickly child, extremely sick, discovered breathing yoga, lived to like 96 years old. He said a yogi's life is not dictated by the amount of days he lives, but by the amount of heartbeats. So there's a direct correlation with people who have a low resting heart rate and longevity, and we know that. What's a great way of keeping your heart rate down and keeping blood pressure down? I'll give you one guess there. It's breathing.
Pills. No.
Alcohol.
I was gonna say bourbon, but
Yeah, depressive quaaludes. Those, I'm sure those work great, but breathing is that's how you do it. If you wonder why athletes can have a resting heart rate of 45 or something, you cannot have a consistently low resting heart rate if you're. It doesn't work that way. So I was looking into in the book, looking at the amount of breaths. We have 670 million breaths we take in a lifetime. If you think about that, you're like, why would I take 25,000 a day? Why don't I take, the ancient Chinese said that the best number of breaths that they actually counted this was 13,500. So that's what, in the day when there wasn't Facebook and cell phones, I guess you could sit there and watch your buddy breathe 13,000 times. But there's actually some logic to that. You're breathing that much slower, and you have a lower resting heart rate. You have lower blood pressure. Things are working better.
One other quick question about sleep apnea, and Lindsay was wondering if there's a correlation between, like how hard, like how much people work in a culture, and the sleep problems that we have, and if other countries kind of don't have the same, like, does the U.S. have more cases of sleep apnea than other countries, or where do we fit on that scale?
This seems like a wonderful opportunity to give you guys one more little visual tidbit here.
Perfect.
Okay, so let's look at this guy. So I explained to everybody that our mouths were shrinking, right? And our jaws were moving backwards. So our ancestors had these very forward growing faces. We could see that, these huge jaws, these prognathic faces. 90% of us have faces that are either flat or grow backwards. What happens when your jaw starts growing backwards? Look at his throat there. That's what happens. So your airway shrinks. So we know that it's not just breathing that causes sleep apnea. Weight causes sleep apnea, direct correlation with that. Also, people who work out too much, you see these oiled up like muscle men. You think these are the healthiest people on the planet. They aren't, because they have so much muscle here that their airways collapse, and they constantly are suffering from sleep apnea and heart issues because of that. They can die really young, which is crazy because they look like the font of health. Mm-hmm. So I think that if you look in other, I don't know specifically the percentages of other countries. I do know that weight is a big one. So you look at countries with weight problems, and you look at other populations of people who are working out too much and having sleep apnea problems. I believe the US is the leader in sleep apnea because we love being number one. So about a quarter of the population is a quarter of the population has some form of sleep apnea. But the last thing I'll say is you don't have to have medically diagnosed sleep apnea to be suffering from problems associated with sleep apnea. The way that medicine works is you have to be diagnosed with it, you have to be choking on yourself for 10 seconds or longer, more than 5 times an hour. So if you're choking on yourself for 9 seconds, 50 times an hour, you don't have medically diagnosed sleep apnea and you're not getting treatment. But just guess what's happening to your body. So this, again, has been studied at Stanford. They found that any resistance in your airway, if you're having some resistance in your airway, you can start to suffer from all of the issues associated with sleep apnea. But we don't want to leave on this bummer note. We're going to leave on this inspiring note. There are people that are doing this research. They've been doing it for a long time. Once you realize this issue, especially with something like sleep apnea or extreme snoring, you have to get that fixed. And now we have these wonderful ways of fixing it and of opening that airway. And it is an absolute life changer for people once they have these procedures and once they get their health in order.
Excellent. Everybody feel good? I want to check back in with you all. Can you email me in about a month and just tell me where you are if you're practicing this? I am Sue, S-U-E, at page158books.com. Reading helps also. After 10 minutes, you're reading, if you read a real book, your stress levels drop by 68%. So get into bed with a book, do some breathing exercises, and read for 10 minutes. And you'll be the happiest person in the world. James, I can't thank you enough. You can find him on his website. It's, what is it?
MrJamesNestor.com. Some jerk took James Nestor, so I had to put an MR in front of there. And you can find all of the scientific references. All this stuff is free. You can find breathing practices by leaders in the field, doctors. I've gotten so many questions. I'm not a breathing therapist. I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose people, but I'm having people from Stanford, Harvard, other top research institutions come on and answer reader questions. All that's available on the site.
Fantastic.
Oh, it's really great. I can't thank you enough, James. And again, you can buy the book here. Go visit James, promote it, share it, and get it on Libro FM. Thank you all so much. And Robert, again, thank you.